Can you please state your name, age, and where you are from?
Charlette Joy Simpler Carroll, and I'm from Cordova, Alaska.
How old are you?
72.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what it was like?
Well, I was born in the old hospital building, which is now the Prince William Marina. The old hospital building burned down in the fire in 1963. And then we lived up on the hill, what we call the hill, which is, it's up, let's see, how do you explain it? Do you happen to know where Bertha Smith's house is? Do you know where Bertha Smith?
No.
Okay, well, you know how you go up to Miss Susan's?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a big house there. That's Bertha Smith's house.
Oh, okay.
Used to be Smith's house.
On the
Anyway,
left, on the
and we
corner.
lived down where McDaniels lives now. We lived there until I was about 4 or 5, and then we moved into that house by the grade school where the land went for the renewal, the renovation of the gym and stuff. And we lived there till they tore it down. Or till I graduated from high school.
So you said you were born in Cordova. How has it changed from when you were a child, or from when you were 17 to now when I'm 17?
Let's see, from when I was 17. Well, it burned down. The main street of Cordova burned down in 1963. And then in 1964, we had the earthquake. And it didn't cause a lot of damage in Cordova, but it did do, it did ruin the roads out, the road out split, from about 7 Mile out, it split down the middle. Then it ruined a lot of the bridges, all the bridges out to the airport, and then all the other bridges too. They had to redo all the bridges from 27 out.
Is that including the $1 Million Bridge? Did that
Yes.
affect that too?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then, and I was a senior in high school when they had the earthquake. And I was upstairs getting undressed from school. And when it started, and I couldn't get down the stairs, our house was shaking so bad. But we didn't have any damage. There was some damage locally, but the one thing I remember was how the Coast Guard ship at that time, the Sedge, went dry 3 times trying to get away from the dock. They had to get underway, and they kept going dry because the tsunami just brought water in and then it took it out right out, and then brought water in and took it out. And I know my dad and I went down to the slough. Now I don't know if you know what they call the slough. It's down there, Odiak Slough, where you go across the bridge there. Anyway, my dad and I went down there later, and we could see the water going in and out. And we had lots of aftershocks. That was what was really scary. Lots of aftershocks. And one guy said that he had been out on the flats fishing or clam digging, and he knew something happened because all of a sudden the clams started popping out of the sand. Wow. And so he got in his skiff and just sat there, and it went dry, and it went dry, and then pretty soon a house came floating by, so he thought all Cordova had been.
Gosh.
But it was a little cabin or something that was in the slough there. That came dry. So that was an interesting scenario.
He said it would float, and then the tide would go out, and it'd drop back down on sand and be stuck again.
Huh.
But Cordova raised 6 feet during the earthquake too, and that's probably one of the reasons the tsunami never came into town. Mm. And I'd say one of the biggest changes really came after the earthquake, because when you went down to the city, what they called the city dock, it was the old dock right now. The new dock and all that area was non-existent. And when you went down to the city dock, there was like a mountain rock on both sides. You went through kind of a tunnel, and there was the powerhouse was up there.
And there's a fish and game building there now.
Yeah,
You went right through there, the fish and game here, that was all rock.
yeah. And let's see, another thing that the earthquake did was, you know, it kind of ruined the clamming around here. And and another thing, when you went from 7 Mile out to 13, that used to be a mud flats. The tide came up to the road, and there was no brush out there. Would you believe that?
Really?
There was no brush, and
The tide came up.
the tide came right up to the road.
A lot of guys launched their skiffs at the top of the road there, you know,
Yeah, and then
ran down those sloughs.
Wow.
so you didn't. You know, that was a big change too to the town.
I think from me being just a younger generation person, whenever I hear about the earthquake, one of the bigger changes that like surprises me is that AC, Baja Taco, well obviously Baja Taco, but like the breakwater and all that was water before that. Like I did not know that until
Well,
I
and
learned
where
about it.
there's fissures and everything is down, that was all mud flats.
Yeah, like and all that
Cordova
had been
outward.
raised.
Yeah.
Like
Cordova
all
and
of
all
that was water
way
and
around
flats.
there.
Yeah.
The road went around there,
So it
but
kind
the
of
water used to
seemed
come right up to the road.
to like expand the town a little bit because all that land.
Well, yeah,
came up.
because they've done all this fill ever since then and fixed all the, you know, all those places. That's all new. And then, you know, there was never all the houses out by Vina Young subdivision. All that's been put in there, and I mean, it was. You know, I never thought of Cordova as being a little podunk town. When I remember when Kimmy came here and she made several comments about the garbage truck and things, and I thought, gee, well, I guess I never thought, you know, because my mom came up here in 1941, and at that time there was no refrigerators. She had just a little box outside, and she said she never was sick so many times from eating food that wasn't good.
She never was?
Yeah,
Or
she was
she
sick
was.
quite a
She
few
was.
times
Oh, she
that
was.
year. Yeah, yeah, she was.
What about 6 Mile, where the house is down there?
No. No, that's all new. In fact, where we have our house, you know, that there was no houses there where Mike's house and our house is. And
Or here.
the only two houses I can remember, Phil Collins' house, the one that he's living in now, and that one where Jimmy Weber lives, and then the one where Frank Burns used to live. That it's the one next to Samuelson's. I don't know who.
Is it
Somebody,
Cunningham's?
no,
You mean out the road there?
well,
Yeah.
Cunningham's house was there, I think.
Not the road.
But
Yeah.
none of
The
those,
red
none of
one.
those trailer courts, none of that stuff was there.
Just Bob Cunningham's place wasn't there.
Bob Cunningham, but I think Bob Senior's was.
Yeah, Bob Senior and his wife
Yeah.
lived
I'm
in
thinking
that.
of that red one.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you know, the house right across from where the trailer court is now, there's Samuelson. Martin Samuelson used to have that place, and I think Martha lives there off and on now. And the house right next to it used to be Frank Burns' house.
Are we at 5 Mile Loop or 6 Mile?
No, you're at
No.
about
What,
2
what
Mile.
are you? No, what are
We're
you
at
talking
4
about right
Mile.
now? So you're talking about 4 Mile right now?
No, I'm talking about 2 Mile.
Wait, I'm confused at what houses we're talking about.
You know the roundhouse.
Okay.
Yeah, and where your grandpa's is.
I thought you were talking
That
about
one, but
6
then
Mile.
I'm talking about further down the road towards town.
Okay.
Right across kind of where the trailer court is there. There's a couple houses there.
Okay.
One kind of sits back in the road, and that was Frank Burns' house, used to be. And I don't remember how long Samuelson's has been there. But like I say, all
That was
these
the
trailer
time
courts, huh?
they were there when I got here. That was in '66.
But there was nothing
But there's a lot of
else.
changes. I mean, you know, when you get to thinking about it, there was none of this, none of the houses, the Vina Young subdivision, a lot of these trailer courts weren't around here. I'm not sure where people live, but
So how
Oh, and
far
I was
does
gonna
the
tell you
road go out
something,
this
too.
way?
when we lived in the old house up by up on the hill, when I was going to kindergarten, and they used to have a theater called the Empress Theater, and it was in where Wells Fargo is now, and it was a really, really nice theater. I mean, plush. I remember going to see Annie Get Your Gun with my mom, and it one day burned down, and we had to stay out of school that day because the sparks were flying all over the place, and they were worried it was going to catch other places on fire.
Which school were you up on, the old school?
No. I went to kindergarten at the Baptist Church. Then I went from first through third grade in the Legion Hall, which is not there anymore. It used to be in the area where the chamber is now, kind of. And then I went up to the old high school till fourth grade. In the middle of fourth grade, we moved into the new grade school.
And where,
What was
is that where the grade school is now?
Yeah.
elementary school?
And then when we went, when I went to high school, I went back up to the old high school. I went 9 through 12 there.
So when did the old high school shut down?
Gosh, I'm not sure.
Because Chris said that CHS was built in 1967. So I
Yeah,
guess when
because I
did you
know that all
graduate?
three of my boys went to the new high school,
What year did you graduate from high school?
64.
So it wasn't
yeah.
so wasn't long.
Wasn't
after
too
that.
long after that, probably.
Yeah, it wasn't.
What was it like? I've always
Did you
wanted to
go
know
to
like
the
what
new
the
high
high
school?
school was
Huh?
like.
No.
No, I never went to the new
It
high
was on
school.
the hill.
I went to the one on the hill.
So speaking of your mom and Kimmy and your sons, how many people are in your family?
You mean total?
I mean, immediate family.
Well, there's right here in Cordova.
Well, you can talk about in Cordova too.
Oh, okay. Well, there's Doug and his family.
Oh my gosh,
That's
I don't
4.
even know them.
Rob and his family.
Rob and his family. That's another 4. Virgil Wayne and Holden.
That's
And
true.
us, that's how many is that? 8. 4 and 4 is 8, and 4 more is 12. And then there's Kimmy and Ben, I guess you'd say that's 5 more.
So, who besides Holden, who's your favorite grandchild? Olivia, the one doing this interview. Thank you, Grandma.
Yes.
Olivia, your computer went off.
Oh, that's okay.
No, that's okay. It keeps recording.
The green light means it's recording.
Oh,
You could have got that one.
I know.
Yeah, I need it on tape. I need to show the cousins.
yeah, you're our favorite.
Yeah. Say that again to the camera, Grandpa.
You're my favorite.
Awesome. See? The power of
Today.
words. No. Always. Okay? We're going to bleep that out later. So, what was your occupation?
I was a registered nurse.
Tell us a little bit about that career.
Did you go to college?
No, I went to 3 years of nursing school. They didn't have many college programs at that time. They had what they called a diploma program, and you went to 3 years of school. You had 3 months off in the whole 3 years. And the diploma program, you went to class and you worked on the floor too, which when I first started at the first 6 months is kind of a training thing, and then you start working on the floor, and you go through rotations. You go, like you go med surge, and then you have a orthopedic rotation. And you spend 3 months in every one of these, and pediatrics and obstetrics, and we spent even 3 months in a mental hospital down in Salem, and we work besides taking classes, we worked 40 hours a week most of the time. And then later on they changed us to 32, but
So
we did
where
long floor.
did you do all that? Did you move around to do the program, or?
I did, most everything was at Manual Hospital in Portland, Oregon. But our mental health thing was at
In
Salem.
you said?
Huh?
Yeah, in Salem.
In Salem, yeah. Salem, Oregon is where we went to the mental hospital, spent the 3 months at the
But you
mental
had
hospital.
the same house, you stayed in the same place all the time, did you, for,
No,
to stay?
yeah, they had a dorm, and we
Okay,
had a dorm, but what I'm saying is,
yeah,
when we took our mental health thing, we had to go to Salem, and we stayed there for the 3 months.
oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did you have one, like you said you had rotations, did you have one that stuck out to you? That you liked the most? Or one that you disliked?
I liked nursery real well, and I was trying to think what. Oh, another thing is I ended up having my appendix out while I was in nurses training, which was really fun.
Faith can relate.
I've been there.
Just out.
Wonderful, yeah.
Yes, you were in good hands.
Did your friends help take your appendix out?
No, no, it's funny. I was sleeping in the dorm and I woke up that night and I had this horrible pain in my side, and we had a tunnel that went from our dorm over to the hospital. And
Case of
so
emergency.
I put on some clothes and walked over there, and the next morning I had my appendix out.
So where have you traveled to?
Oh, let's see. We've traveled most of the United States, and we went over to Scotland and England and all over Europe when we went over to see Rob and Kylie when Rob was working over there. And we spent time on the East Coast because that's where my mom and dad are from. And we spent time in Arizona and Texas, and in California. We've been in California several times. Oregon, Washington,
Maine for a while,
Maine for a while.
Connecticut.
Yeah, that was when we were on the East Coast.
How many times have you traveled the Alcan?
Oh, probably 5 or 6 at least. 10?
It's 8.
8?
Yeah. We had to look up stuff for your... Wait, tell us about a big event that's coming up on the 30th.
Oh, our 50th wedding anniversary.
Well, I just thought my birthday.
Your birthday's in December.
I have to tell you about the first time we drove the Alcan after we'd been married.
Please do.
We were living in Wyoming after Virgil got out of the Coast Guard. We went to Wyoming because he thought he wanted to work there and see if we could make a living. Well, that didn't turn out too well, so we bought a 28-foot travel trailer, and we had a station wagon, and so we proceeded to fill everything up and drag it up here. Well, this was in March, and at that time the Alaska Highway was mainly rock, little rocks.
Huh.
And we had 21 flat tires coming up
Oh my God.
because the
You
tires on the travel trailer were what they call homing tires and not good
They weren't
tires.
even a 2-ply, they was a homing tire. So when you leave there, you're supposed to put new tires on it. Well, the guy told me that, that's good tire.
And Doug was a
Paul had
baby
it for
then.
a
Your dad
long
was a
time, could've
baby.
come up here.
No, I can't even believe it.
Yeah, he was. And
We got to the border, the United States border, and they asked asked me if I had the title for that, and I said, no, I said, the bank in Wyoming got the title. And he says, do you realize you could have sold this for a lot more than you bought it for? I says, I had 21 flat tires. If I could have given it away, it'd been gone. He said, go ahead.
but we lived in it a couple of years. I mean, we lived in it for until we got our house.
When your mom and dad came, what drew them here? If they were from
Yeah.
Maine?
My
And
dad
why?
was in the Merchant Marines. He went in when he was 18 years old. And he had loaned some money to a guy. He was on the West Coast, and he had loaned some money to a guy to come up and start a clam cannery in Cordova. And so he came up there in the late 30s to see him, and the guy had a can of money for him and a can of money for himself. And so then he went back and married my mom, and they came up here. And that's basically how they got here. They canned clams for quite a while until they couldn't get tin because of the war, the Second World War.
What was the name of that guy? Have I maybe ever heard of him?
You know what? I have it written down at home, yeah, but I don't know it offhand right now.
Okay,
It
probably.
was out of the clam cannery was out of White Shed.
Yeah. And my mom, one day, she went walking on the beach, and she had a big stick, and she was going like this, and Dad asked her how her walk was, and she said, "Well, I didn't see any snakes." But she was from Delaware. That's a long ways away.
Yeah.
And actually, when we were kids, we spent one summer back in Delaware when I was 12 years old. And so I got to know my grandparents and some of my mom and dad's relatives quite a bit because in those days you didn't get to travel very much because it wasn't easy to travel, for one thing.
I bet you that was a fun change for you.
Yeah, it was. It was an interesting change.
What has been your most extraordinary experience?
Oh.
I wish I could have got that.
I'd say my kids.
Huh.
I guess, I mean, had a lot of good experiences, but having kids has always been a real blessing.
Can you tell us a story from your life?
Another story.
Any story.
Let's see.
Maybe like a most memorable one, or one that just comes to mind easily.
Well, I can tell you when we were back east in Delaware, we were in our motorhome, and we were down on this beach on the Indian River in a nor'easter, and that was an experience. It blew and rained, and the tide would come in and would come up by our motorhome and go back out again, and Virgil took our motorhome, and finally the next day after it just about blew us off the thing that night before, he took and put us up by the laboratory place and to kind of shield us from the wind because the wind was really whipping. We ended up having to stay there for a couple of days because the dunes had broke onto the road and everything was shut down. We couldn't get out of there.
They broke onto the road like they
Yeah,
flew onto the road. They just
Delaware's got a estuary like those, the length of it practically, and you have to go down that. There's bridges where these rivers run through, and they'd go down and park there. And anyway, it washed out the road with the sand. They're just sand.
Oh, I see.
When they have it paved. Anyway, we couldn't leave there for about 3 days.
That was pretty neat. And the ducks would come up swimming by the motorhome.
I had to pick up, it has rams on it, and I had to pick it up as far as they'd go. And the water was right there.
Yeah, I was
Didn't
wondering.
come in.
Huh?
I was wondering if it came in.
Yeah, it was,
Not
the
quite.
axles were underwater.
Wow.
But we never did have any trouble, because when we left there was lots of rivers that we had to run through, and freshwater rivers. And I'd stomp on it, just rip through there, and spray everything.
Hold on, Charlette.
Yeah, I had it for several years after that too, so and it never wasn't a problem. I was worried about that.
What is your favorite place in Cordova and the world?
Oh, my favorite place in Cordova. Let's see. Oh, probably home. And in the world,
Home.
I don't know. I liked Oregon. We spent a lot of time in Corvallis, Oregon, and I liked Corvallis quite a bit.
What would you like to share about Cordova?
It's a nice place to live. I mean, you can feel safe and comfortable. And I think as people get older, they like it for that reason because they feel safe, you know, more so than when you are in a big city or in your, you know, places where there's lots of people, because it's a safe place.
How does the word old make you feel?
Oh,
Young.
old. I don't know. Have a lot more aches and pains than I used to. They always say you're only as old as you feel, but sometimes when you get older, you feel old. You feel that old.
I'm old.
What decision do you believe has had the most impact on your life? What do you think your life would look like if you had not made the decision the way you did?
Oh. I suppose getting married is probably the biggest decision you make. If I hadn't, I'm not sure what would happen if I'd gotten married to somebody else later on, or if I'd just stayed and been a nurse for the rest of my life, or what. It's hard to know.
How long were you a nurse? Did you quit nursing when you started having children, or did you?
Not completely. I used to do a lot of relief work at the clinic, and I also, years ago, the hospital used to do quite a bit of surgery, and I used to help out when they did surgery. So I actually have worked at nursing pretty much it was probably about 40 years by the time I got through, when I finally gave up my nursing license.
And why do you think they stopped doing surgery? Probably just because it wasn't very safe here.
No, I don't think it was that. It's just that I think a lot of it happened, I don't know, I think because the doctors didn't want to come down here anymore. They were getting too busy in Anchorage, so they really didn't have time to come down here and do surgery. And then I do know that they had started having trouble getting anybody to do the anesthetic. They used to have
The
this
insurance they had to pay was the big mistake to guard them from being sued all the time.
but I had all three of my kids here too.
Yeah,
Where, you know, there's a lot of people that you have to go to Anchorage now.
Yeah, they stopped doing that in my class. Like Trisha and Anika, like some of the last babies who were born here.
Quinn was the last one.
Quinn?
Yeah. Oh. Do you feel the need for a better connection between the youth of Cordova and the older generation? If so, what do you feel we need to do in order to bridge that gap? Whose responsibility is this? And what do you feel the older generation can do to bridge that gap?
That was probably a lot.
Yeah.
Blame it on the young kids.
Do you feel like there's a gap between the
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, you know, that I just think you kind of grow away from the young people because you don't know who they are anymore. Your kids aren't in school, so you don't know who they are. And if you're involved, like with being involved in what you guys are doing, it helps us keep, some, and through church and stuff, you learn some of the kids, the young people.
Do you think we can do a better job at learning about each other?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of older people around here who could benefit from younger people having a little more interest in them, or some of the people that are by themselves, especially.
Do you think that it's the younger generation or the older generation or a mix of both's responsibility?
Probably a mix of both. But one thing you have to realize about the older people, a lot of them, there are some of them that just can't get out either.
Mm-hmm.
That really can't get out and do things. So I think they do have some good things here for Cordova for, the older people, the senior lunch and so I think that's good. But I do, I think it's just like any place, older, frail people can get left behind. Especially if they don't have any family that's looking after them, that is there around to.
And it's not really their responsibility because they can't.
Yeah.
It's really the young people's responsibility because they really can't do anything.
That's right. They can't.
Notice my granddaughter don't come around as much.
Cassidy?
You mean your favorite one?
'Cause I come around a lot.
Well, not enough.
Okay, I'll start coming
You
out
just have to move
twice a
there.
week.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, her next door. So.
Yeah,
Yeah, Faith, why don't you ever come
you
around?
can come over and visit me.
Well, it's rude to just barge in.
Just
mean,
walk in.
Hey, I'm here.
Last question.
Your new granddaughter.
If you could give us any piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh,
wanna
let's
stop
see.
Never mind.
Oh, what's the matter?
Faith,
What? Oh, yeah. No.
we're doing this question separately because
Say hi, Deb, before we stop it. Okay.
Hi, Deb.